All right, the big mystery, closing a deal. How to close a deal as a sales guy, and how to get it done, how to actually arrive at a contract or a signature is a really big important thing, getting the yes. Lots and lots of salespeople are tactically very good, and they're very poor at this piece. This is an important sort of shrouded in voodoo and black magic portion of the sales process. There aren't really very great right answers. There are some techniques at how to drive to a close, but generally arriving or pushing toward the closure process is sort of a soft human skill. So let's talk about what it is and what it involves. First of all, if you remember, there's a sales process that we've talked about in other videos, and if you don't know these pieces, you should go watch the videos. There's market research and segmentation, there's prospecting, there's doing demos and executing sales conversations, there's pipeline management, driving each of your ongoing deals through various stages in your pipeline, and that all is supposed to lead to, at the bottom of the pipeline, is supposed to lead to closure. The reality of closing is that it actually happens naturally, and it's pretty easy to do. Sometimes you won't even notice it. A customer will just call you and say, okay, I'm ready to sign a deal. It happens naturally when this process is executed well. So if you're trying to go for a close, and we'll talk about that in a second, and asking a customer like, hey, let's get this thing done and go for a close, and they say no, it's because you failed somewhere along this process. So what you do when you hear a no is you go back into these pieces of the process and try to figure out where the holdup is and why they're saying no. And there's one specific place where that most often happens, and that's that they have some objection that you failed to uncover. Or maybe you have uncovered it, but you failed to respond to that objection and get around and overcome that objection. So also watch that video on objections. That's important. That's most often why things aren't happening. Sometimes you'll talk to sales guys and they'll say, I don't know why, I just can't seem to close this deal. Everything else seems to be going right. And you ask them questions and they'll say, yeah, that's good, and he likes this, and the pricing's fine. But really they're probably wrong about one of those pieces, that the customer is objecting to one of the pieces of the process, otherwise it would have closed. So you're missing something is the key. You might think sometimes a customer might be telling you things that aren't true, or telling you things they wish were true, but you're missing something in these cases. So you start over with the customer by asking probing questions. You start asking, is it an expense problem, or is it a resource issue? Is there someone on your team? Is it a decision issue? Start asking questions and try to uncover the reason why they're saying no. It's really important to remain emotionally neutral through that process. A lot of people have a habit of deciding that the customer's either wrong or dumb, and what you get is this sort of combination of bad body language between a potential customer and a salesperson. When they say no, if you go, they can read that, and the natural human reaction is they stop wanting to give you information about these objections because they start to feel sort of defensive about their decision. If you're judging them about their decision, you're not going to get the real objections from them. If you're emotionally neutral and friendly, and really there's nothing to be mad about, they're simply choosing not to use your product, if you keep that point of view, then they're much more likely to answer your objections in a constructive way. And what that leads to is process change and product development change, which is really important. The closure process is a huge part of the information gathering process with your customers. So let's say you have done this well, and you feel really good about the deal, and you're going to go toward closure. Really, it's if you're starting to push toward closure and you're getting pushback, it's this process we just described of identify those objections, figure out what they are, try to answer them or overcome those objections, and then if you do, but you still get another objection, then just repeat that process over and over until you get toward a close. It's really important to recognize the moment of closure and to ask for it. A lot of salespeople will push a conversation along, and they'll be right at the point where it's natural to say, hey, is this something you guys are going to do or not? And they won't do it. They're afraid to ask that question, or it makes them uncomfortable. And if you never ask for the close, they'll say, okay, well, let's go back and talk to our team, or okay, we need to reconvene, or let's talk next week. Or every time they do that, that's a form of an objection. They're pushing off the close. Now, there's no reason to be a jerk and push like a telecom guy and not let someone get off the phone or out of a conversation. But the point is, when it feels like you've answered all the questions and consideration is done, ask for it. Ask for a close. You have to say, are you guys interested in this? Are we going to do the deal? Should I give you a contract? Should I write up the terms? Should we talk about pricing? Those kind of things will move you toward close. And then really ask the customer to execute in terms of finishing the deal. That is often when you will actually hear objections. They'll hold off telling you those objections to actually push for a close. And then you go through the process of overcoming and repeating. So here are some things that people miss. They drive all the way to the close and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen. One is, does the person really have the power to say yes? Is that their role inside the company? Often you think that that person has the power to say yes, but they really need permission from their boss. And in the background, they've been trying to negotiate for permission, and their boss won't give it to them. So you keep wondering why this drags on and drags on. They want to make it happen, they just don't have the ability to make it happen. That's important to tactfully uncover. Also, give your flexibility to your sales team to grease the wheels. This is sort of important. Sometimes they just need one final little push. We've all been in this situation with discounting where somebody says, well, I'll tell you what, if you do it right now, we'll give you X, Y, Z. That actually works. So have some slight flexibility that you give your sales guys where he says, I'll throw in some service, or I'll throw in another free product, or we'll give you free training time, or whatever the not very expensive extra pieces that you can throw into the sale. That often works. And then this is really important. Closing for closing's sake is not always good. I'm sure we've all been in sales positions where you feel either annoyed or threatened or pushed by the salesperson. That doesn't make for a happy customer after the sale happens. Pushing for a close and really slamming through a deal often leads to unhappy customers, bad references when people call them and ask them about your product, and just relatively annoyed people. So closing, in order to have a happy customer and a repeatable process, they've got to want to do it. You can push them toward it, but ultimately that's something they're going to have to want to do. So that's closing in a nutshell. Really, it gets substantially easier if you concentrate on your sales process. But if they're saying no, you're missing something, figure out what that is. Learn to recognize that moment and physically ask for a close.